and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf. It's now 2 weeks since the National Assembly resumed and re-amended the clauses which had caused President Muhammadu Buhari to withhold assent to the Electoral Act. The issues had bordered on the conduct of primaries by political parties, and the debate which this sparked was long drawn and passionate as to whether or not political parties should be confined to just direct primaries or be allowed to pick whatever option suited them. Now, while that was lively, civil society organizations and other political actors struggled to draw attention to other aspects of the bill which they felt could be inimical to the success of candidates at the polls. At the top of this was the issue of election financing. The new Electoral Act, as passed by the National Assembly, has increased exponentially the spending cap for candidates and their political parties. In the new bill, as amended, presidential candidates could spend as much as 5 billion naira from an initially allowed 1 billion. Governorship candidates could raise as much as 1 billion naira. Would-be senators could spend as much as 100 million, and members of the House of Reps could spend as much as 70 million naira from an initially approved 30 million naira. Now, lawmakers say they increased the cap to reflect current economic realities, taking into cognizance the issue of inflation, which has affected the naira. CSOs, however, argue that this would give even greater room for money bags to take over politics, as this could exclude young people and women who might not be as economically capable as they ought to be. But should money be a hindrance for capable candidates? Tonight, I speak with two gentlemen. Onigbinde is the co-founder of Budget, a civil society organization that simplifies the budget and matters of public spending for citizens. And Dr. Dipo Awojide is a strategist, a management consultant, and a career coach. Gentlemen, welcome to Hard Copy.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much, Markwe.
I should also say Happy New Year to you. So, Shewo, let me start with you.
Okay.
I want to quickly ask you about this recent tweet which kind of set Twitter on fire. Twitter is back in Nigeria, and it's for good reason too. But just when it came back, you had this very controversial tweet. You said, a 10 billion naira GoFundMe for Peter Obi will be a great starter for those who want to crowdsource Nigeria's next leader. This will change the dynamics with the space hijacked by money bags. Now, that got nearly 3,000 retweets and almost 8,000 likes. I don't know if you're leaving matters of budget now for raising funds for aspirants. Is that what you're doing?
No, I'm not. And I was just putting a conversation in the space. And even though that was misunderstood significantly, I made it clear that there's an understanding that Peter Obi might not be able to afford Nigeria's political space. And I say, yes, if that's the conversation that we are having, and that disqualifies him from trying to be a president, why it can't his enthusiasts raise a 10 billion naira fund? Because that changes the dynamics. If every single money that would fund election is coming from an unknown source or from a very tiny class of people, then there is no way that we have not short-changed accountability one way or the other. So it was a suggestion to his, and that's why I said to those who, I put that language there. But Nigerian media, some media houses took it up and rewrote the tweet and said, I'm fundraising 10 billion naira for Peter Obi. I'm not, and I made that properly clear. I'm just saying that we need to decentralize electoral financing. There is no way where shady funds, illicit funds, opaque funds keep finding its way into our electoral system. And we don't think that is also a critical factor for the rise in corruption. So we have to really have conversations around it. And it was me suggested to. The same way I could suggest it to Peter Obi, I could suggest it to Bola Tinubu, I could suggest it to Yemi Oshibajo, if he declares interest, I could suggest it to Bukola Saraki and anybody. It's just about that. The fact is, if someone says you can't afford the electoral system based on your legitimate earnings, maybe the citizens, if they really want you, they should pay for it.
Big question there in terms of affordability for the electoral system. I mean, one will ask, why do we need so much money to be able to afford to be able to stand as candidates in an election? But let me ask you, Dikbo, you are a strategist. Should I say happy birthday to you in arrears? And very laudable project you came up with as a birthday gift for young people. And I'm sure that you are very involved in young people who perhaps might want to, or you might be very interested in looking at young people who might be interested in throwing their hat into the ring. Very active on social media as you are. Do you think that that platform could serve as a way to really raise funds for those who might think that money could be a hindrance for them?
Yeah, so I know a couple of thank you very much, Marco and Sean, by the way. Yeah, I know a couple of young people who, already are asking, for friends, for colleagues and, for folks on social media to actually donate, towards their elections. These are, young folks from the APC and the PDP. And I think it's perfectly in order, that these young people ask, I mean, I've got a couple of my own friends who are running for House of Representatives, for State House of Assembly, members. And, I'm happily going to, donate to their election campaigns. So I think it's entirely okay, for young people to put themselves forward. If they don't have so much money, I think it's okay as well for them to ask, friends, colleagues, party members to actually donate towards the election, election finances. But I think it's also important for political parties, APC, PDP, and the other political parties we have in Nigeria to be, be considerate, so the amount that goes towards purchasing tickets, for example, they have to find a way to reduce it, so that we don't have, fantastic bills like, not too young to run, being approved. Then we find out that the young people don't actually have the finances to actually actualize whatever political dreams that they have. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's in order for young people to actually put themselves forward and ask, for people to donate to their elections.
When you say that young people might not have the finances, normally are people expected to run elections from funds in their pockets, or are they supposed to seek the support of those who want them in that particular office to support them also financially?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, all over the world, elections are very, very expensive. You've got to do media rounds. You might have to travel around the various villages or, communities or states or local governments. You have to print some banners, there's a lot of things that you actually spend money on elections. So, it's, if you're not a money bag, if you don't have so much money and you actually want to contest for election, I think in Nigeria, it becomes almost practically impossible, for you to actually run a successful campaign if you want to stand a chance. So I think it's okay for people to spend their own money, but if they don't have that money as well, I think it's okay to actually try to, crowdsource, and get donations, from friends, from family members, even from the public, or even from party members.
For example, we were doing the parliamentary system, and the only thing you need to be president is to win an election in your in your MP, in your constituency. I mean, and that constituency is technically like an House of Rep constituency of today. Then we have, I mean, in the UK is around 560 constituencies. So maybe in Nigeria will have 800 constituencies, and it could even be much more smaller. Then that means you only need to campaign maybe in 2 local governments of Nigeria today. But now you're trying to be president, you have to win mandate at least in 24 out of 36 states. Now, the presidential system that we took on, it's an expensive outlay. And you see elections in the US, even a Senate race in Georgia was over $700 million in some sort of way. So we've copied the system, but we also did not copy the attributes of the system. So what you have in the US is that you have a lot of retail donors contributing $5, $10, $20. And if you listen to a typical US electoral candidate, he's asking, whatever he's talking about, he's asking you to chip in something, a $5, a $20 bill. And You have someone like Bernie Sanders that raised almost $96 million, from 1.4 million people. So, and 10 billion that I suggested is $20 million. It's not impossible. If people truly believe, yeah, he's a man for us. Yeah, let's let everybody rise up and fund. If everybody thinks Oshibajo or Tinubu or Atiku is a man for us and he doesn't have the resources to do it, we should. And it's not even about having the resources. It should be the way we should signal our electoral system. We have to put our money where our votes is in some sort of way.
Well, some people have looked at the new cap, which, because when you said 10 billion naira, some people will be asking, where do you expect him to spend that? Because even the cap for presidential candidates is 5 billion naira if the new electoral act is approved. So I have to ask you first why you think 10 billion naira will be a more realistic figure, and if you don't think that that figure is excluding candidates rather than including them.
No, so because of the structure of a presidency, we have almost 200,000 polling units. On the day of an election alone, you would have possibly two persons that would man your unit for you. You would pay them, let's even say you pay them 10,000 naira each, and you have two of them there, maybe for redundancy purposes. So you're already somewhere around 4 billion naira already, by that alone. Then you're technically going to do media rounds alone, quarterly payments and across the country. And you're going to have campaigns and visit at least all the 36 states of the country. Then you are going to definitely also support people down the line. So not just you as the president is running, you're supporting a senatorial candidate, you're supporting a national rep candidate. So because the elections are held on the same day, we'll be lying to ourselves if we think that it should not require you to spend 10 billion naira to run for office in Nigeria. Now, do you have to do that all alone? No, you don't have to do that all alone. People can believe in your ideology, your thinking, your methodology, and say we will chip in with you, we will back you all the way. It's not, and we don't need a million people to do that. We don't even need 5,000 or 200 people to do that. It could be 10,000 or 100,000 people, and that's just fine. So what we need is that we have to decentralize electoral finance. Nigerians have to get into the zone of picking people who are their winners and backing them also with their resources. This idea that we expect that somehow the candidate is going to steamroll themselves or get someone to bankroll them into public office and somehow will now be benevolent to us and will have a full right to accountability. It's a bit shaky in my own view. Yeah, because we are in a space where has budget. We see it all happen. Someone without a website, without a track record, gets a 30, 20, 40 billion naira contract. And you're asking, well, how, where, who, all of it is all connected to our electoral financing.
Big questions there. So, Dikpo, when we talk about excluding young people, should they really be afraid of being excluded by this cap or see it as empowering? Because if you're able to raise the funds and you are able to, show yourself as truly popular, should the cap really deter us if we're to go by what Seun is saying and saying that even this cap is not realistic enough? Shouldn't we consider that cap empowering?
Yeah, I think, first of all, 5 billion for presidents, that's the cap. 1 billion for governors, senators, 100 million naira. We all know that realistically, that is not what happens on ground in Nigeria. The FT, 2 or 3 days ago, actually published an article about Nigeria, the coming election and, election financing and how much goes into spending and all of that. And they did actually say that, an estimated $2 billion, which is around 800 or 850 billion naira, goes towards election financing in Nigeria. So, even if anybody wants to, if Seun, for example, wants to lead, raising 10 billion naira for Peter Obi, that is not even going to be enough, based on the realities on ground. So again, all over the world, election financing, elections are very, very expensive. And as I noted earlier, I think people don't have to be out of pocket if they want to serve. And it's always good that there's legislation and regulation, and the rules always have to be followed as well. Because this cap that we have on here, again, they are not realistic. But I would expect, that for young people, again, that they put themselves, put yourselves forward And it's okay to ask. It's okay to ask, for friends, for family members, for party members to actually donate towards the election financing. I hope it helps in some ways. And it's not, one money bag or a godfather, giving someone 500 million or 1 billion naira and expecting them to pay back. So,
well, let's take a break at this point. I will let you expatiate a bit more on your point when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Onigbinde, co-founder of Budget, a civil society organization that simplifies budget and matters of public spending for citizens, and Dr. Dipo Awojide, a strategist, a management consultant, and a career coach, are our guest tonight. And we're talking election financing. Well, gentlemen, just before we went on break, it would seem that, both of you have talked about how expensive elections are. And I was asking Dipo if we should see the new cap as empowering. But from the conversation that we're having, it would seem that we might need to rethink the economy of our elections. There are questions as to why do they have to be so expensive? Is it necessarily because of the system that we have adopted, or how we've chosen to practice that system in Nigeria? Let me quickly ask your thoughts, Seun.
Yeah, like I said, it's the architecture of our elections. We have chosen an election that makes your constituency wider than necessary. And what we have made is that a governor is going to campaign in all the local governments. Akintola, Awolowo, Chief Awolowo and Chief Akintola, they only ran elections only in Osun division, Chief Awolowo in Ikenne division, and those were elections that made them sit, at the federal parliament in the 50s and in the 60s. Now you want to be governor of a state, or which would look like a premier, in those days, you would have to run on the mandate of everybody. It looks like a good point for inclusivity, but it's not helpful, in terms of the outlay of the elections. And now it has been over time.
So you have to ask, do we have to spend so much? When election season is now in full gear, you're going to see all the ashwabis, the face caps, the handbands, the posters littering everywhere, literally constituting a nuisance. Do we need to go down that route? Or do you think that we could practice it in such a way that it is more economically? I know that some people will say that there's another economy that profits from that. Maybe my own my own organization or my own media in terms of broadcast organizations are not excluded. But do we really need to go down that route, spending so much before candidates, people who would really vote for you, have you in mind to vote for you?
I think we don't need to go down deep. We don't need to go that route. But the reality is that a political culture is a political culture issue. And in terms of our culture, we have a culture of merriment, and every single time people want to build, there's a party or some fun, opportunity. When you look at another environment that is talking about politics, you see them attuned to ideology. They're trying to debate policy. We, as much as possible, just maybe we have swings by tribal, or we also maybe the likability of a candidate. But at the end of the day, a whole lot of people also build a culture of merriment and fun, and also to project that they are popular. Because I've heard things like, this guy did so many posters. This happened in Lagos in the last election. These are too many posters. That means this guy must be winning. There's also a bit of projection on the side of the electorate that I'm everywhere. And there's a likability and a probability of a win here. So when you see people doing posters and just being everywhere, it's also because they're projecting to the intuition of the voter that I'm just not just one silent guy who's trying to run for office. I really mean this.
Dipo, let me quickly let Dipo wade into this, because he's a strategist. I don't know, what is the thinking of political parties and their candidates with that sort of strategy?
Yeah, I think it's, people actually, first of all, some money bags donate to political candidates and to political parties because they want some outcomes, at the end. When their candidate gets into office, they want a contract or they want something. So that clearly happens in some circumstances. But again, I think with elections in Nigeria, it's just, I think there's so much focus on the merriment, as Sion has said, and very little focus on the actual issues. So the education sector, the health sector, infrastructure. So you have power, rail, you have all forms of, electricity, you have the roads, you have security, you have the economy. These are the main issues that elections should actually be about. And if we now have a political culture where our elections are about these main ideological issues, then I think it will be less about money. Of course, you're going to need money to actually drive the agenda, to promote, your manifesto around some of these issues. But in our own case, it is just money about other things, money spent on, a whole lot of other jamboree activities, and less on the ideological and the main issues that we should actually be focusing on.
So how do we drag it? Yes, how do we then drag it to the issues to ensure that we all as a people focus on the issues?
Yeah, I think starting point would actually be, to make presidential, gubernatorial elections and all these elections, to make debating a priority. Candidates who want to contest for elections must actually come up with a manifesto.
Sean, let me quickly take you up on the issue of accountability. Political parties are meant to submit the audit of their campaign finance after the elections. I think 6 months after the elections. This is usually observed in the breach, and there's not a lot that is the penalty for that. Do you really think that we can improve the process of accountability and even the cap, excluding or inclusive as it might be, that we're able to hold political parties to perhaps even determine what precisely might be a more realistic cap to set for political parties? Let me take you on the issue of accountability.
Okay, so first of all, let me say that the accountability is critical, but it's about the punitive element to that. If a party does not submit an election financing report, what exactly is the punishment? We'd like to write laws in Nigeria when it comes to the institutions or the powers that be, without not adding punitive elements. For example, even if you don't respond to the FOI, there's no strong punitive element to it. The same thing we're trying to do with this electoral. Without a punitive element, which could lead to maybe even the registration of a political party, there is no way for us to talk about we put a cap in there. The second thing I want to say is that, is a cap necessary if it won't be followed? And that's just my reality, if it won't be gained. What we need is more transparency. And that's what you get in the US. You form a super PAC, you're a donor to an organization, or even a corporate organization, you donated to a political party. It's in the public. The public have access to it. They have a right to see it. You know how much every single entity donates to every person who's running for office in the country. So they know which organizations lean to what ideology or that. I think we'll be better off with transparency, in some sort of way, than all this cap that we are significantly obsessed with. That is my own view. What I think we need much more is transparency. Let us know which monies get into our election. And let's focus less on the political parties. Let's focus more on the candidates.
Okay.
You're a candidate running for office in Nigeria, publish a statement of who is funding you.
Okay. Dipo, do you agree with that? Do you think the transparency is what we need? Should we scrap caps?
Yeah, I think I'd say both basically. We need to be more transparent. We need to know who is funding each candidate and each parties. But I think the caps, are also, regulation, is very, very important. But those regulations, we have to find a way to ensure that, the rules are followed. So if, for example, the rules says 5 billion naira for, presidential election, we have to find a way, to ensure that, the rules are actually followed. Because if the rules are not followed, and currently we all know that the rules are not followed because the main political parties are clearly going to spend more than 5 billion naira, 5 billion naira on their presidential candidates, So, maybe increasing it to 10, or maybe finding a way, to have a realistic figure and ensuring that that figure is actually enforceable. And again, the reporting at the end of the election cycle, someone checks. In the UK, I know, for example, if you break the law, if you go above the spending cap, for your elections, you get in trouble. They fine you, or they actually find a way to ensure that there's some punitive measures against you. But in Nigeria, I doubt that any of that happens.
Gentlemen,
so yes,
we're totally out of time. I'm so sorry. We have to go now. I have to thank you both for coming on the program. Thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you, Maokwe.
Thank you, Maokwe. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, that's our program tonight, but get on the conversation using the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Good night.